It's Authors Revealed, and I'm Becky Anderson. We are thrilled. We have Sherri Duskey Rinker with her new book. It's called Mighty, Mighty Construction Site. Her first book, Goodnight, Goodnight Construction Site, New York Times bestseller list, and so will this one. You've got to read this one and share it with a child that you love. Sherri, it's so great to have you back here at Anderson's and in Naperville.
Thank you so much for having me, Becky. I'm honored to be here, as always.
Oh my gosh, well, it's so great to have you here. And we're so excited. We have been waiting for this book to come out.
Thank you.
And it just came out yesterday. And what a great day to come out on Valentine's Day.
Yeah, perfect timing.
But Mighty, Mighty Construction Site. And
Yes.
we are thrilled that we finally have this book and we can put it into grandparents and parents and aunts and uncles and everybody so they can then read it to kids who will absolutely adore it. So
Thank you.
So I want to know, how is it like having this book now out in the world? I mean, what is that like waiting and knowing and the anticipation and knowing and worrying about, because this isn't your first time around the block publishing a picture book.
No.
But how does it feel to have this one out now?
I have never felt so much pressure about a book. I literally have had some sleepless nights over this. Just the fans for Goodnight, Goodnight Construction Site have been so great and so supportive and so vocal that I so badly didn't want to disappoint anyone. So it just felt to me that there was just nobody cared when I had brought out Goodnight Construction Site. I was, no expectation. I was totally free. And then this time I really felt that a little bit of a weight to not disappoint anyone. And I know not, tons of people at Chronicle put, so much behind this, and Tom, but mostly it's those little fans that I just didn't want them to be.
But you see, that's what makes it even more special, because you put such care and thought into this. Because I'm going to tell you, these books are for us here at Anderson's, and I know in a lot of other bookstores around the country. But I can't tell you how many hands I've put the first book in, Goodnight, Goodnight Construction Site, into, and it was the go-to book. It still is. And that's what is so wonderful, that now we have another one. And with these great characters, and what's so great is that girls love them as much as boys.
That's true.
So I've given so many as baby gifts, and it doesn't matter if they're having a girl or a boy.
Thank you. I actually signed it for some 5th grade girls today.
Oh,
they're
really?
Copies that they brought to a school visit that they've had since they were little.
Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah, so that was kind of fun.
Yeah. So I want to know, with the first book, and you have such a great story about how Goodnight, Goodnight Construction Site got published, and that'll be in my next question.
Okay.
But I want to know, where did the seed, you have a great story of where the seed for the first book began to grow. So tell us that story.
Yeah, so I had my first son, and he had what I would say, traditional book loves, animals and nature and sweet little goodnight stories. And then I had my second son 4.5 years later, and the only books he would let me read to him at night were truck books. So My Big Truck Book, I Stink by the Macmillans, every book called Construction Site, ABC Construction Site. And then, so we do that, and then we would do our goodnight prayers, and it was thank you for bulldozers, and thank you for cement mixers, and thank you for crane trucks. And by the end of all of that, he was so wired in talking about all these great, big, strong, powerful, noisy trucks that I was searching for some way to sort of take the vibe down a little bit. And so one night I got an idea that, there was a construction site near where we lived in the city, and I would remind him how when we drove past there, all the trucks were sleeping at night, because just like little boys, and girls, of course, those big trucks needed to rest so they could get a good start on the next day. And so I would tell him about, my favorite trucks doing their last job and slowing down and turning off. And he would tell me about some of his favorite trucks, like the cement mixer, getting his bath, like he would get his bath, and dumping out his final load and doing his final job. And it ended up that's the sort of the story we told ourselves. And one night before I fell asleep, I literally jolted up in bed and thought, I think this might be a book. I think this could be a book. So there you go. That's
it
the
was
story.
like a sort of a revelation after having told him this story over
Yeah,
and over again.
exactly.
Yeah.
And
so with the first book, did you do any research on heavy machinery that work on construction sites, or to know, you knew all the kinds, obviously, because your son knew all the different types, probably, right?
Yeah, and so he was the kind of kid that we would take a sack lunch and go watch a construction site. Or when we would get stuck in traffic to see road construction, it was the most exciting, wonderful thing ever. Yeah. So I knew a lot just from having read to him and seeing all these construction sites. And then whenever I had a question, I would ask him.
Yeah, right.
What would you say? What kinds of actions does a bulldozer do?
Sure.
And I did a little research, but I didn't need to do much. It was so much a part of my daily life.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like with my son. That's how I learned about all the dinosaur names, and I still remember them to this day. And it's also, he loved Cars and Trucks and Things That Go from Richard Scarry. And what is so great about your books is that you cannot pull anything over on a child reading it because they'll know that you've skipped a page.
Yeah. A lot of them know it by heart, that's
they
for
do.
sure.
They know it by heart, for sure. So your journey to being published and getting Chronicle Books to publish the first book is a rarity in the publishing world today. So tell us a little bit about what was your plan to try and get this idea published, and did you do any research about the whole publishing process, from idea to actually publish book. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah. I was a graphic designer. I had a little company. It was myself and one or two other people, depending on, the busyness of the season. So I thought, surely I know someone in publishing. How hard could it be to find someone? And I didn't. But I made call after call after call, and just, finally someone knew someone who knew someone who knew someone, and I found sort of my treasure, which was the SCBWI, the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. And I joined, and maybe a week later, I got this soft cover book called The 2008 Guide to Publication. And I still have my dog-eared, post-it noted, highlighted copy of that. Right. And I went through that, and in the meantime, I had written the manuscript, and I had done some design concepts, because who knew? I didn't know I didn't need to do that. So I had that all together, and went through and looked for publishers who accepted unsolicited manuscripts. And Chronicle rose to the top for me, mostly because I had their books in my bookshelves with my kids. Yeah. And as a graphic designer, I loved the high quality of their production, the thickness of the paper, and the beautiful illustrations.
Oh, yeah, everything's great.
And in fact, one of my my oldest son's favorite books was The Night I Followed the Dog by Nina Leibman. Yeah. And I thought any publisher that would take such a chance on such a weird concept, that concept is so crazy, might take a chance on a mom from Chicago that's never written anything like this before. So that's sort of how it happened. I sent it to one publisher. I had a whole list of publishers, and I thought, when I don't hear back, then I'll send it to this. I had 5 years worth of publishers, thinking this will never, I'll just be patient, keep sending it. And lo and behold, 3 months after I sent it, Mary Colgan, my editor, called. Yeah.
And I think it's great about Chronicle. They publish, even on their adult site, they publish really wonderful, different, quirky,
they take
wonderful.
Chances.
They do, but they publish really cool stuff. And knowing that they're in San Francisco and not with the rest of the publishers in New York, it makes it,
They do have a vibe.
They definitely have a vibe. So I think you landed at a good place.
I couldn't be more thrilled.
But how cool! Their first publisher you sent it to, and they pull it out of a slush pile.
I know.
As they say.
Yeah, they said they were sitting around a table every month. They'd look at, go through the horrible job of going through the slush pile with wine and pizza. And Mary pulled it out and said to Melissa, I don't know, maybe this could be something. What do you think? And there you go.
So Tom Lichtenheld, who's the illustrator on 3 of your books, is also an Illinois illustrator.
Yeah,
and he
total coincidence.
I know. So that's what I was wondering. Did you know Tom?
No,
before
and
this?
not only did I not know Tom, I'd never heard of Tom. And the first book that I looked at that he'd done was Duck Rabbit. Oh, and there could not be a book more dissimilar than what I was looking for. I freaked out when they suggested him. And oh my gosh, it's just turned out to be.
Yeah. Well, that book, it's that one's more graphic.
Stark.
It's stark,
right, yeah.
right, because it's supposed to show how you can look at things
it's a
differently.
great concept.
It's a great
so
concept,
smart.
yeah.
But But
you didn't know him before
no,
this.
and we still laugh about that. I'm like, I remember not only had I not heard of you, I was completely against you.
But that's so incredible, because so many times an author will be matched with an illustrator and they never meet during the whole process. But you have, obviously, you guys don't live very far from one another. But did you work with him knowing what the page layout was going to be and what you thought should be visually on the page because of your graphic background? I mean, did you coordinate with him, or did he illustrate it and then you went and looked at it?
Yeah, I'm trying, Chronicle and most of my publishers have been really great about letting me see the very earliest sketches and letting me have some feedback. So that opportunity was offered to me. I don't remember having to say very much, or I felt like, it's been a while, but I think I was pretty on board with everything, that he had done.
Yeah.
If I had a small suggestion, I'm sure I offered it. But
Yeah. Well, your words and those pictures go brilliantly together. So.
It's just been, wow. Yeah. Who knew?
So now that you're surprised with everything that's going, and it makes the New York Times bestseller list, almost weeks on the New York Times bestseller list.
That's crazy.
So did that surprise you, knowing that this is your first book out of the gate, and you're on the list and you stay there for a long time?
So I got a call I got a call when the book was going to be on the New York Times for the first time, and it was right after the book had come out, and it was, I think it debuted at number 10 on the NYT. And it was a surreal moment. Like, I was so happy just to be published. But I can remember my very first meeting as an author. Chronicle had sent me to Follett, and Tom would be there. I'd meet him for the first time. And when I was sitting in the lobby, and someone from Chronicle came in and said, "Oh my gosh, I have a very first bound. It's a comp, but I have a very first bound. Would you like to see it?" I was so excited. And I said, "I hope somebody buys it." And she said, "Sherri, has nobody spoken with you about our predictions for this book? Sales is very excited." And I said, "No, nobody, no." And she said, "Well, I'm here from San Francisco for this book. For this.
And you didn't know this?
No, and in fact, the whole rest of the meeting is a blur. I remember I was horribly nervous to be an author. Like, I was sure they'd, find me out, recognize me as the scam that I was. And the meeting's a blur, and I got back into my car and sobbed.
Wow.
Just sobbed. I don't know. It just, who knew, right?
Yeah, but it couldn't happen to a better person, a better book. Really, truly.
Thank you. It's a miracle.
Well, and the thing is what I so enjoy about these books, because to me, there are certain picture books, and even some middle grade and higher, these books that I call forever books. These are books that are going to be around forever. They're going to be on shelves everywhere for a very long time. And these are those type of picture books. And the reason why is that's a book that you don't mind reading over and over and over again with a child. And especially when in Goodnight and reading it before bedtime. It's such a special time.
It is.
But those are the things that make it special. And because I wanted to ask you about your rhyming text. Now, I'll be honest with you, I buy a lot of children's books. Sometimes rhyming text in picture books can be quite annoying, but you are quite the opposite. They're fabulous. So I just want to know, how do you do it, but sometimes with rhyming text, but you do so well because it carries the story through in such a beautiful way with the rhyming text. So is it hard to craft that? Because I couldn't do that, but I want to know how you do that.
I think mostly it comes fairly easily to me. I mean, I certainly will get called on by my editors and, "Oh, I know that you picked that word just to make it rhyme. That's just, you need to figure that out.
Okay.
That's horrible."
Okay.
But overall, I feel like I have a pretty good ear for it.
Okay.
All of my books don't rhyme. It just so happens that all of the ones that have so far been published do rhyme.
Right.
But I think I just kind of have a feeling for it, maybe. I don't know.
But it makes it enjoyable to read because the rhythm and everything is so wonderful.
Well, and what I love is that kids get an ear for it.
That's right.
And I will I'll read a book to them for the very first time in a big audience, and they'll be able to guess the words that is coming. So that's kind of fun for them to get that ear. I think
Sure.
it's sort of musical.
Right.
And,
And it's great for emerging readers too. Those when they're starting to hear those sounds and
I
everything,
think so
right?
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, reading aloud, how it's so important. And it's important to read even when your kids are older. And those are some of my favorite times with my 3 kids is reading aloud to them and reading, even reading Harry Potter together and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So tell me for you, because you've done this a lot with your boys,
Yeah.
the importance of reading aloud. What does it mean to you?
I look back. So now, when I wrote Goodnight, I had a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have a 16-year-old and an 11-year-old. And I read all 7 books of Harry Potter out loud to my oldest. We read everything, he loved Spiderwick. We read all of those.
Mm-hmm.
We read from the earliest Pat the Bunny all the way through until he was in 3rd grade. And I remember we finished Harry Potter and he wouldn't read anything for a long time because he felt like he didn't want to give it up. He had this.
Right.
And then he found Percy Jackson. And I blame Rick for taking my child from me because once Rick Riordan came along, Ben no longer I couldn't keep up. I couldn't give it to him fast enough.
Right.
But I have an 11-year-old that still lets me read to him.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, my youngest son still lets me cuddle with him and we read. He'll die if he sees this. He won't see this, hopefully.
Okay, no.
But we still will sit and read. He's into a Judy Blume book right now, the Super Fudge. He loves Super
those
Fudge.
are great.
Yeah, I think hearing words, their vocabulary is so greatly increased.
Sure.
And you encounter words in reading that you don't typically use in day-to-day speech. I think both of my kids are really verbal, have a great vocabulary. I think in large part because we've read and devoured so many books.
Oh, it's totally true.
Yeah.
Totally true.
It's so important.
So important. So you started off as a journalism major when you started college?
I did. I started college
and then you changed
to graphic design.
Mm-hmm. So, but words have always been something you've loved, right?
Yeah.
So do you remember whatever age you were, what age you were when you thought of something that you wrote, whether it was a rhyming poem or something? Do you remember that, how old you were?
I do. I remember my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Bach, thought that I had a gift for poetry in 4th grade. And she took us to hear a poet read, a few of us, maybe 5 girls in the class. She took us to hear a poet read aloud. That poet's name was Maya Angelou. And
wow.
I know. And who knew that would be important at that age? Yeah.
Wow.
That was life-changing for me. And she was, I didn't have a great home life, quite honestly. After my grandma died, I don't really remember anyone reading to me at home, but teachers read to me. And that was, gosh, so formative and so important and life-changing to have stories read to me.
Yeah.
Even well past the point that I could read on my own. Yeah.
Well, that's why I love to hear schools when they're doing a one school, one read, and they're reading aloud. It doesn't matter if you're 10 or if you're 6 years old, and to be read aloud to. And I think you can do this, for all ages. I mean, it's fun to read even, my husband and I read to each other sometimes.
I will read something aloud occasionally. My son's 5th grade teacher has just finished Fish in a Tree.
Oh,
and I
just
thought, what a great book to read aloud to kids. And the story is, so fabulous and encouraging for struggling readers and just kind of,
Yeah, and it's a heartfelt book.
It really is.
It's books like that teach so much empathy too, which is important.
Yeah, and I think every kid goes through an age where they think they're weird or, different. And I just love that that's such an affirming story in that way.
So 25 years in graphic design.
Yeah.
Yes. So what I want to know is that career, how did that inform you now that you're doing picture books? And I know you have some other things that are coming up too that I want to ask you about. But how did that inform your life as a writer?
That's interesting. I think there is something to be said for the fact that I grew up loving picture books. And I really think that partly is what influenced me to want to put words and pictures together for a living. I think I think visually. And I also think that perhaps I think in a marketing way, like what will sell. I hate to say it like that, but what will strike the market.
Yeah, sure.
I think you know, being a mom and having been, you know, so in that mindset, I think it's so helpful.
Yeah.
But I think there's something to be said for, I could envision, you know, maybe what this would look like and be.
Right.
Tom Lichtenheld says, you know, very rarely do we come into this industry straight. You know, we all come into it from some other place and bring whatever talents and wisdom we've gleaned from those
Sure.
other places into this. And I think he's right. I know most people I know that are doing this are, you know, either in advertising or marketing or teachers, or, you know, bring out some wisdom from their former
That's
careers
right.
into
Yeah.
this.
Yeah,
So.
it's very true. So what do your boys think with Mom, the famous author now? Well, you know, now that one of them gave you the inspiration for that first book.
Well,
right?
let me just tell you, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, Zach, my 11-year-old, walked in the door. My office is, I have dining room turned office, so it's right by the front door. And he came in the door, and I said, Zach, could you come here? Could you please let me read something to you? And he walked into my office and threw his backpack on the floor, and he said, isn't it Ben's turn to do this? So to say they're not impressed would be an understatement.
right.
This is just what Mom, I think because I've been doing it since they were so little.
Sure.
This is just what Mom does for a
Right.
living.
Yeah.
And
Oh, that's cool,
my 11-year-old especially is mortified by any attention that he might get because Mom's an author.
Right.
No interest. Yeah. So I'd love to tell you they think it's fabulous and they are super into it, but
it's good that they feel the way they do.
Not so much.
Yeah, right. That's good. So I know you do a lot of school events.
Yeah.
And so tell me what you do at your school events. And I'm sure you must get some fun little notes and letters or things that
my
kids say or
gosh.
questions.
Becky, I have the best job in the world. What other job in the entire world do people hug you after you finish your job? Or little girls and boys make you cards on construction paper with hearts and I love you and I want to be an author too. I mean, what other job, no corporate job in the world do you get your boss hugging you at the end of the day? I get amazing questions. I love to talk about really, really, really and mostly my audiences are younger, I would say up to 4th grade. Sometimes I do 5th graders, but usually the itty bits who I love. We talk about the magic power of reading and books and how important it is to read and how, like any skill, you have to work at it. And most of them are taking dance or taking a sport or learning a musical instrument. So we talk about having to practice, and practice makes perfect, and that reading is just one of those things too. And but I really hope they come away excited about books and reading.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah. I love the fact that in Mighty Mighty Construction Site you have a girl truck.
I have 2 girl trucks.
That's right, 2 girl trucks. So that was very neat that you did. So tell us a little about making 2 of them female, even though they don't have proper names.
Yes.
Yes. So.
I will say I did get some letters from angry moms, mostly, with the first book. It had never, because it was, the book was written on my experience of raising boys, and all of the characters were kind of based on little boys I knew that my kids played with, or my kids, that it was just very natural that that this was a group of rough and tumble boys. My dad was one of 5 boys, so these were 5 boys. When we talked about the sequel, and it occurred to Chronicle that there should be a sequel well before it occurred to Tom or me. So it kind of felt important in this day and time to talk about, and my kids were getting older. They played with girls now. In the beginning they were like, no girls, but it felt important to talk about girls as part of the mix of cooperation and teamwork, and how we work together, and so yeah.
And the other book, Steam, and I have to say this title slowly because it's like a tongue twister.
It's a tongue twister. Steam
Train, Dream Train.
Yeah.
I try to say it really fast sometimes. But another great one that Tom also illustrated. But what I love about it is what Chronicle has done. I wanted to know your involvement in all the other books, the different mediums that, these 3 books, or this one I'm sure will be put into something else too. But there's board books, there's lacing books, there's matching board games, there's even the plush of the giraffe from Steam Train,
I
Dream
love
Train.
him. I love his little neck. I get pictures of little children with their little fists around his neck. Yeah.
And then also the, your son will.
Excavator.
The excavator, stuffed animal, which is so adorable.
He's sweet.
So were some of these your ideas, or are these the things that and did you have any, ideas that were put into these different books?
Yeah, so I will say that Chronicle is an amazing creative machine. Most of the things I find out about well after they're way underway. I get some feedback. Tom takes the bull by the horns and really helps to make sure that visually everything is cohesive. The exception to that would be the board books. I did write them. Tom illustrated them. We worked on them together. And in fact, I think the Steam Train board books, maybe he even did the illustrations first and I wrote to fit, or at least in part.
Oh, the colors and the numbers, right?
Yeah. We wanted pajamas from the beginning. We just thought that was such a no-brainer, and we were both, it was driving us crazy that it took so long for pajamas. But everything else is a little bit of a surprise for me, and I'm always, oh, okay.
No, but
wonderful.
But how great for kids when they love a book and they love what's in it, that they can have other things to
and
do
I'm
with.
so grateful to Chronicle for embracing this as a brand and really moving it forward and giving it visibility. They're amazing, amazing.
So I want to know what's coming up next, because I read a few things that sound really exciting.
Okay.
So something with Virginia Lee Burton, which would be very exciting because it makes so much sense.
When I'm asked who my favorite picture book author is, I have a few, but my earliest childhood memory of loving a picture book was The Little House by Virginia Lee Burton. It was one of those books that I had on the pile that Grandma read to me all the time. And I think there was something about a little girl with a tumultuous home life where you saw this little house go through some stuff, and ultimately she ends up just in a picturesque, perfect place, watching the seasons come and go. It was just a very soothing story for me. So I have a book coming out that John Rocco has illustrated called Big Machines, the Virginia Lee Burton story. This, I am proud of all of my books. All of my books have a piece of my heart, but that book, I can't even begin to tell you how much that book means to me. I've become a part of her family. Her family has become a part of my family. The Demetrioses have welcomed me into their home. John Rocco and I spent days in California going through Ginny's sketchbooks and archives and linoleum plates and having dinner with his son and his son Eris and his wife, and it has been just a spiritual journey for me. And the fact it was just so, HMH has welcomed the book, and that's been wonderful. Wow. And then I have a book coming out with Jake Parker at the end of the year called The 12 Sleighs of Christmas.
Okay.
So
that's great.
I'm really
so
excited.
Who's publishing that one?
12 Sleighs of Christmas is Chronicle. Okay. And my Virginia Lee Burton book is HMH. Yeah,
because
Ginny's
they
house.
publish all of her.
They have her catalog.
They have her catalog, which are some of. See, those are forever books. They've been around for so long, and they will be around.
And my hope of hopes is it introduces her to a whole new generation of readers. That's my big hope. So.
Well, and those books we still sell.
I love them.
The Little House, Mike Mulligan, and Katie the Snowplow.
And Mabel. I love Mabel.
Oh my gosh, they're all great. So this will be so great to have a book about her.
I'm really excited.
Oh yeah, it'll be fantastic. Okay, we can't wait. So ideas on time. When do you think they'll be out?
Virginia Lee Burton book will be out September 1.
Okay.
Ish. Yeah. And then my 12 Sleighs of Christmas will be out, I would say mid-October in time for the holiday season. Yeah.
All right. Well, you have to come back and see us
for
both
I will.
of those.
I'm so excited about both those
And
books.
teachers will absolutely love your piece with Houghton Mifflin, so they'll love that.
I can't even tell you, Becky. I'm just over the moon about it.
Okay, well, that's so cool. Well, Sherri, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me,
thanks,
and
Becky.
Congrats on Mighty Mighty Construction Site.
Thank you so much, and thank you for everything that you do for books and authors and readers in this community and around the community.
Well,
You're amazing. Thank you.
Authors like you make it easy.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Great conversation with picture book author Sherri Duskey Rinker about her new picture book. It's called Mighty Mighty Construction Site. She's also the author of Goodnight, Goodnight Construction Site, which is a New York Times bestseller. This is a picture book you have to give to any child. Thanks for joining me on Authors Revealed.